Hey everybody, how's it going? It's the Daily Shooter, and today we're going to be taking a look at two pistols that on paper seem almost identical. But how do they stack up in real life? Today we're going to be taking a look and doing a quick comparison of the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield and the Taurus G2S. This channel is proud to be supported by the Firearms Policy Coalition. Make sure you check that link down in the description box, become a member, donate when you can, and do your part to fight for our Second Amendment rights. Okay, so the Taurus G2S and the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield in 9mm. Like I was saying before, if you look at these two on paper, they are nearly identical. Both are subcompact handguns, both are chambered in 9mm. Both are single stack, and they both come with 7-round magazines, even though the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield comes with an additional magazine that will hold 8 rounds, whereas the G2S comes with an additional magazine that still only holds 7 rounds. Both are nearly identical in radius, in barrel length, in weight, in width. I mean, they are, again, almost carbon copies of each other if you look at them on paper, but paper's not where it counts. There's a lot of subtleties and a lot of differences that you won't see on paper, and things that you maybe wouldn't even consider. So we're going to talk about those things in the comparison today, other than just, the standard specs and details, stuff like that. So let's go ahead and take these two to the table, and we'll talk about some of the differences. Okay, so here we have our two pistols side by side. Let's go ahead and get started by first talking about some of those tech specs and details, and then we'll move on. We'll talk about some of the more subtleties that might help you make your decision. Now, again, like I was saying before, on paper, these things are almost identical. The M&P Shield has an overall length of 6.1 inches, where the G2S has an overall length of 6.3. So the G2S is about 0.2 of an inch longer. When you're talking about width, which is something that's very important if you're considering concealed carry, the M&P Shield comes in at just under an inch at 0.9 inches, whereas the Taurus G2S comes in at just over 1 inch. So that's two things to consider right there, length and width. Another thing to consider is weight. One thing that I found interesting is that the Taurus actually weighs less than the Shield. Now, there's several different variations of the Shield, and each one, for some reason, when I look it up, has a different weight on it. The weight difference isn't all that different, but, it's there. It's something to consider. So what I did is I went ahead and I weighed these both independently. When I put this on the scale with no magazine, no ammunition, the M&P Shield came in at 18.7 ounces, whereas the G2S came in at 18.1 ounces. So the G2S was just a little bit lighter. Again, this is with no magazine and no ammo. Now, if you're talking materials, these two are pretty much identical. You have two polymer framed handguns. Both have stainless steel slides and barrels. However, this Smith & Wesson has its own proprietary finish on it. This one right here you can see has the bead blast finish, but Taurus does offer this in the black as well. And I can tell you that even though this is more of a proprietary finish that has a brand name attached to it for Smith & Wesson, the finishes are pretty much identical. So again, polymer, polymer, stainless steel, stainless steel, stainless steel barrels. So let's go ahead and take a look at the controls next. We'll take a look at the G2S first, and I'll talk about where they're located. So this one right here is very similar to a Glock when it comes to the takedown. So we have this little takedown lever right here. You'd go ahead and pull that down in order to take this thing apart. We have our slide stop, slide release, and then to the rear we have our safety. These are not ambidextrous controls. On the Shield, it's pretty much the same thing. We have a lever right here that you would rotate downward in order to take off the slide. Again, our slide stop, slide release is located towards the front middle of the grip, and then we have our safety, which is located on the back right here. And again, none of the controls are ambidextrous. Now, these are both striker fired handguns. This one right here, the G2S says that it's double action only, but as I've been using this, it feels weird, because to me it feels like double action, single action. It doesn't feel like a double action only firearm, and that's because when you rack the slide, the trigger actually does set back just a little bit, and the reset is extremely short. If you haven't racked the slide and you're just going to shoot it without having a round in the chamber, or maybe you just want to double squeeze it, whatever, the trigger sits much farther forward. So when the trigger system isn't actuated, the trigger sits much farther forward. You get that, longer, more excessive trigger pull, but then after your first shot, the trigger resets much shorter. So even though they say it's double action only. It sure seems double single action to me. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm just giving you guys my own personal opinion. That doesn't really have anything to do with the tech specs or anything like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at this side of the gun right here. We'll take a look at a couple more features. Now on the M&P Shield, there is no accessory rail, whereas on the G2S, there is a slot right here, a little Picatinny slot that you can add a flashlight or something like that. We can take a look at our grip surfaces. This one has kind of almost like a stippled feel to the surface, whereas the M&P just has this texture right here, which I've never really been a big fan of. Now, before we take a look at the slides real quick, I just want to mention that the Shield is 4.6 inches tall. Another thing to consider if you're going to be considering these for concealed carry, 4.6 inches versus 4.8 inches on the G2S. Now, the 4.8 inches, I think, just comes from this little hump in the back right here where they measure it. But again, if I put these two together, it seems extremely similar. It's very hard for me to find the 0.2 of an inch difference between the G2S and the Shield, even when it comes to the length. If I hold these two side by side, it is very difficult to tell which one is longer. I mean, there's definitely a difference, but if I hold them like this, you can see that, I have to kind of move these around just to make them match up to find that 0.2 of an inch different in the length. You can definitely see the width, but really in height and width, these things are so similar that to me, it's almost not really that much of a decision maker. Now, as we take a look at the top of the slide, you'll notice that on this model of the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield, you'll see a loaded chamber indicator, which is the same as the G2S. Also has a loaded chamber indicator, which presents itself a little bit up and slightly elevated so you can feel it with your hand or visually inspect it, and it will let you know if there is a round in the chamber. As a completely non-spec form, this is just my own personal opinion, I like loaded chamber indicators, especially for those people who don't like press checks. If you don't want to do a press check for some reason, you can always go ahead and check the loaded chamber indicator. I have never in my life had a loaded chamber indicator that was incorrect. Even if it's on a Glock. Glocks have their extractor on the side right here, and if it presents itself just a little bit out of the side, you'll know that there is something in the chamber right there. So again, that's just totally my opinion, but in my opinion, I like the loaded chamber indicators. They don't look all that nice, but they work pretty well. Now, since I mentioned that the Taurus has a double action trigger, I should also mention that the Shield has a single action only trigger. Now, it's kind of an advantage, I guess, to the Taurus, given the fact that you could double strike a primer if the primer is not working, where you can't do that with the Shield, but that's not really a practice that I try and encourage people to do anyway. If you have a problem and it doesn't go bang, you're going to want to tap rack and put a new round in there. I wouldn't waste my time striking it again, but you can where you can't, so I guess that's something that I should mention. Okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about those subtle differences. Now, the subtle differences, some of them are based on my opinion and some of them are just fact, but the ones that are based on my opinion are something that you're going to have to take into account for yourself. There are certain things that I like about the Taurus over the Shield and certain things about the Shield that I like over the Taurus. The one advantage I'd give to the Taurus is the grip texture. This is a really nice grip texture. It's almost like a stipple job. So it's like a very light stipple, but it allows you to get a really good grip and a really nice purchase on it. So when I'm shooting with this thing, even when it's 108 degrees outside, I don't feel like I'm going to lose control of it at all because it has that nice stippling kind of all over the frame. So it's on the front right here, they have it on the back strap, and then we have these two panels on the side. That's one thing that I always wish Smith & Wesson would improve on. I know they did kind of improve on it with the 2.0, but still not to the standard that I would like. I'd like to see something a little bit grippier, especially in a gun that is as compact as this. Now, I know why they do it. They try and keep the texture down at least a little bit so that it's not rubbing on your skin and causing you irritation if you're going to be carrying it underneath a shirt or something like that. But still, I want more control over my firearm. And so I'd have to give it to the G2S when it comes to grip texture. Now, one thing I like about the Shield, which is very significant over the G2S, is that the safety, which is again located right here on the Shield, is much smaller. It's much more flush to the firearm. I don't feel like I'm going to activate it or deactivate it accidentally. It is a pretty decent safety. I don't typically carry something with a safety. I like to carry my Glocks, which just have internal safeties. But if you want to carry something with a safety, this one right here is small. It's still easy to turn on and off. But at the same point, it's not something that's going to be accidentally hit. Whereas on the G2S, we take a look at the safety here. The safety is quite large, to be honest with you. The safety is much easier to turn on and off. It doesn't, the whole thing doesn't pop up. It just kind of rotates, as you can see right there. So the safety rotates like that. And I don't know if you guys can see this. We'll see if I can kind of get it on camera here. Probably not. But the safety actually protrudes quite a bit on the G2S. So instead of being flush like on the Shield, you can see that the safety sticks out quite a bit. Again, I'm having a really hard time showing that on camera, but still, it sticks out quite a bit. And so where I would feel a lot more confident that my safety is not going to go on or off without me knowing about it, with the Taurus, I would be a little bit less confident in that. Now, other than the grip texture, another win that I'd have to give to the G2S over the Shield is the fact that the G2S actually has an accessory rail. So if you want to put lights, lasers, or whatever else you can fit up there, you can go ahead and you can do it pretty easily, and it opens up the door to how many different devices you can use versus the Shield, where you'd have to get some type of device that would lock into the trigger guard. There's definitely lights that are available for the M&P Shield, and you can get something that'll fit pretty nice and flush. As a matter of fact, they sell models that have flashlights on them. But I feel like you have a little bit more versatility when there's an accessory rail. So I can put stuff on here like this little O-light right here, which is specifically designed for subcompact handguns. And it gives me a lot more lumens than a lot of the stuff that's available for the Shield. So again, the accessory rail is kind of a win for me. Now, when it comes to the factory OEM triggers, not the Apex Tactical that you see here, I would have to give the win to the Shield. And that's because the Shield has a much more comfortable trigger to shoot. It does have a little bit of a shoe on it, which does give you a little bit better finger placement than you have on the Taurus right here. The trigger, the original trigger at least on the Shield, is a hinged trigger. So when you start bringing it back, it brings the hinge back. That allows the trigger to move all the way back and unblocks the safety. And then you can go ahead and you can fire it. Whereas the Taurus has a very similar trigger bar to the Glock, where you have this little safety mechanism in the middle. You would depress that with your finger, and that will allow you to bring the trigger all the way back. The problem that I have with the Taurus, other than the trigger feeling a little bit heavier and a little bit longer than the Shield, is that that trigger bar, that little safety bar right there, does not go all the way back or does not recess enough into the trigger shoe to make it as comfortable as the M&P. So when I'm shooting these for long periods of time, the amount of comfort that I would have over the original trigger here and the original trigger here is definitely going to be a big win. And then again, the M&P Shield has, to me, a much nicer trigger and a much nicer reset. The reset on the Taurus really isn't bad at all. When you go ahead and you have this thing set up here, I'll see if I can show you. So let's just go ahead and we'll rack it. So you see we bring it all the way to the back right here, and then we'll reset it. And then there is our reset spot right there. Bring it back. And the trigger is fairly nice. It's not as good as the Shield, but still it's not bad at all. And then we're talking about double action. You can see it's a much longer pull. So they say it's double action only, but if you look, you'll see that here is where we start retaining a little bit of weight. It gets heavy, it's still smooth, bring it all the way back. And then there's our break right here. But if it was double action only, then I would assume the reset's going to be all the way up here as well, but it's not. The reset's right there, and then the break. So anyway, I still have to give the win to the Shield. I think the Shield has a nicer trigger. Now, when it comes to reliability and shootability, those are two things that you can't put on paper as well. The reliability of the Shield is time tested. This thing's been out for quite a while now, and people have put millions of rounds through their Shields, and this has proven to be an extremely reliable gun, even over time, whereas the Taurus G2S has only been out for, well, not even a year yet. So the Taurus G2S hasn't been out for all that long, and while it seems to be a very reliable gun, and it shoots well for me, you don't have that time test that you have with the Shield, and if you're going to be carrying something to protect your life, it's nice to be able to look back over multiple years, and again, millions of rounds, and see what other people's experiences have been, or whether or not they've had any failures. So I'd have to give the win to the Shield on that, just because of the amount of time that it's been out and the reports that have been given back from the customers. The Shield is an extremely popular gun. That's because it's reliable, it lasts long, and it's an accurate gun. I shoot both of these pretty much the same. This one is a little bit easier for me to hold on to because the GTS is just the G2S is just a little bit thicker, and so with my hands I can kind of get a better grip on it than I can with the Shield. But still, that just comes with a little bit of practice. I shoot the Shield and the G2S pretty much the same, and I would say that accuracy is going to be the same as well. It's negligible if you consider that ammunition changes accuracy, and obviously everybody has a different skill level. Now, lastly, I want to mention the price difference. You're going to be looking at about $100 less for the G2S than you are the Shield. So if you're somebody who's on a really tight budget, and I understand tight budgets. I've been on those really tight budgets where you can't even afford a pizza on a Friday, and you're just, trying to live life, pay your bills, live paycheck to paycheck. So you don't really have all that extra money. Saving up $180 for the G2S might be all you can save up for. After that, it pretty much breaks you. You won't have enough money for ammo. You won't have enough money to go out and shoot and practice with it. The M&P Shield is a little bit more expensive. You're looking at $100+ more for a shield, again, depending on which model you get. So there is a massive price difference, and given the fact that these are both two very comparable guns with very comparable features, they both seem to be reliable and accurate. That's, kind of makes for a hard decision. So it's up to you which one you actually like and which one works best for you. My suggestion is to go to a range, see if they have either one of these available for rent. Rent them, shoot them if you can, and then get an idea for where you sit in your opinion. Again, like I was saying before, a lot of this stuff is based on my opinion other than the stuff that you're going to find on paper. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I really appreciate you watching. If you have any more questions, you guys want to talk a little bit more about it or have a debate, that's what the comment section is for. Again, I want to thank the Firearms Policy Coalition very much for helping to support this channel. Please like, subscribe, and have a great day.